of 50, and we can't have an at-large team with an RPI of 75, and that's bad news for the ACC if they go that route. So the thing about it is, I can't tell you, you can't tell me what the committee is going to do on that, because nobody knows but the committee, and we're all going to find out together basically when the field is announced.
One of the other things too that I have to think about though is that with the tournament coming up, and I wanted to ask you about this too, with the idea that there are certain places that are more open as far as COVID goes. Are the NCAA, are they going to look at it from a perspective of, we want to try to get as many people as we can in the stands? Are they going to, let's say that you have a team that, if you have, we have 16 regional sites. Let's say that you've got 5 different teams that all have a legitimate thing to be 14, 15, and 16. Are they going to look at it from the perspective of, hey, we want to go to, say, Mississippi, and I'm just using them as an example because their state's more open, or a team from Texas or what have you, simply because they can put more fans in the stands? Do you think that's something that's going to happen there?
I think it doesn't matter so much from the NCAA or selection committee standpoint, because the NCAA, I actually saw today just on Twitter earlier today, they're recommending no more than 50% capacity at these regionals. Now, Ole Miss and Mississippi State are probably looking at that and thinking, oh boy, because I mean they've already pretty much had full stadiums there. Those have been, the last few weeks, those stadiums have been really, really packed, and it's created some atmospheres that are kind of reminiscent of like the great college baseball atmospheres we had in years past, which we've been missing. So that's the recommendation. Now, where I think it might matter is, what if you're a hosting team and your local community, whether it's your state or your city or your campus community, says you can't put more than 20% capacity in the stadium? Does that make sense for you to host a regional in that case? Because you're not going to be able to recoup the money. It costs money to host a regional. You have to create infrastructure around this. It's actually probably going to cost you more money this year, because you're going to have to set up a COVID testing site for the team personnel. So I think the answer is yes, because I think of it this way, like, schools are not getting rich hosting these regionals.
Right.
The reason you host a regional is to give your team a chance to go to Omaha. And so if you're telling me I can only sell 20% tickets, well, that kind of sucks, but I'm in the business of putting my team in a position to get to Omaha. So I'm not going to pass up the chance to host a regional just because I can't make as much money as I would otherwise.
There's just so many questions that are there that you have to think about. But as far as when you look at the SEC though, you can make an argument for, I would say, 8 regionals. I think that's fair, close. Or do you think it may be a little less than that?
It'll probably be fewer than that, just because, I mean, I see your point. I'm not disagreeing with your point.
Right.
But the deal is, I think the math is just such that, you could maybe, there was a year 2016, I believe, when the SEC had 7 hosts, and that was a record. I think that's probably the cap on what we see here, because the math is just such that these teams beat each other up. Somebody has to lose games, right? And by the time it's all said and done, I just don't think there are going to be enough teams that have that resume. The other wrinkle added in here, just to reset for your listeners, is that they are announcing the host sites 3 weeks early this year. So the week of May 10th, they're announcing the host sites, which is abnormal. Normally, the host sites are announced the day before the field comes out. Because they have to set up the COVID testing part of it, they're giving teams more time to set up their regional. So there's a chance that, if you're a team that is going to make a deep, a late run to host a regional, you can't do that this year. Basically, you need to run, the finish line for hosting is May 10th. And whatever you've done before then is how you're getting judged on hosting. Everything you do after that could affect your seeding. You could host as a 2 seed. If you fall off, if you get awarded a host site, let's use South Carolina as an example. They do enough to host on May 10th. Then they fall on their face the last 3 weeks of the season. They go 0-2 in the SEC tournament. The committee might look at that and say, well, we already gave South Carolina a host. We can't go back on that, but we can make them a 2 seed. And we can put a different 1 seed there that wasn't a host originally. We can put them there as a traveling 1 seed. So that's just yet another wrinkle in the season that's been full of nothing but wrinkles.
Joe Healy from Baseball America joins us as we preview the South Carolina matchup with Arkansas tonight. Taking your calls at 803-978-1832 if you'd like to join us on the program. We will take calls when we come back right here on Fox Sports Radio 1400.
There's never been a more crucial time to champion the power of homegrown food. What if every family had the opportunity to grow their own food? By supporting the planting of 1 million gardens, whether it be grown in a community garden or in a fire escape or
What's up, Alan? We were previewing the South Carolina-Arkansas game. If you got a question about Georgia, you can call us at 803-978-1832, 803-978-1832. I don't know. What else did you miss? I don't know how good Georgia's going to be there, friend. We shall see. Joe says Georgia was in the field, according to in the projections. You guys had them.
I'll have to see where we had them, but like they're in now, and they've got Missouri and Auburn the next 2 weeks. Like I think they'll win both those series. I think Georgia's gonna be a regional team.
Well, there you go. Some love for your Diamond Dogs there, Alan. What a weird name for a team, Diamond Dogs. Come on, Alan. It's better than the Vandy Boys. I don't get that at all. It's weird. All right, here we go. Welcome back to the Rundown on Fox Sports Radio 1400 around the world on the iHeartRadio app. I'm Rob Sanders, your host. Thanks for joining us today. And we'll keep moving along. Sweeney says, who does Joe think the Gamecocks will beat in Omaha in the championship series? Slow down, sir. Slow down, sir. I mean, I think the Gamecocks have potential to get there, but man, getting there and winning is tough.
It's a different deal. Like, you know, I've always said this, that winning games in the regular season is completely different from how you win games when you get into the postseason, and particularly in Omaha. What I would say about South Carolina is that I really do like that they kind of know who their starting pitchers are. Like they know that they trust. Now, Thomas Farr has been a little more up and down lately, but they know that they've got Thomas Farr and Brandon Jordan, and in this case, Will Sanders as well, who's been excellent the last few times out. So I like that they kind of know who their guys are on the mound, and that they're a team that can get a little bit of depth there, because that's the type of team that typically fares a little better in Omaha.
You know, we talked about teams from the SEC, and you mentioned the ACC as well, but especially around here, it seems like we don't really follow teams that are outside of those two conferences. I mean, is there a team that doesn't sit in those two conferences that you think has a legitimate shot to do some damage in the tournament?
Well, I'll even go outside of, you know, because there's also the Big 12. Like, you know, Texas Tech is always in the mix in the Big 12. Texas is good again this year. So I'll go outside of like even that or the Pac-12 or anything. Louisiana Tech is a team to watch. That is an old team. They're a team that really benefited from the extra COVID year for their players. That is an adult team. Like that is a team full of grownups. And so they're experienced, they're old, they're also really talented. One of my colleagues, Teddy Cahill, had a coach in the state of Louisiana, an assistant coach, say that's the best lineup in the state of Louisiana. And now you start to think about, okay, that includes LSU, that includes UL Lafayette. You know, there's a lot of good team. Tulane, that's a lot of good teams in the state of Louisiana. And he said they had the best lineup there. We've got them ranked inside our top 20. So they're deserving of that. And that's a team that I think, you know, could make one of those types of Cinderella runs to Omaha, assuming that all clicks for him. They're going to most likely host a regional, and that certainly helps.
803-978-1832, 803-978-1832 if you got a question for Joe Healy from Baseball America. And, of course, you can read his content. It's up on the Baseball America website. He'll be covering the South Carolina and Arkansas series the next couple of days, squeezed into a doubleheader, 2 and 7 o'clock tomorrow after the first game tonight. Brandon online says, do you think Kingston can get the Gamecocks back to where they were under Tanner, back to Omaha and national champion contenders on a yearly basis?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this team, it's had some ups and downs, but this team is basically there. This would not be a surprise. We haven't just ranked inside the top 10 now. By definition, that's a team that's a national title contender. Now, I understand there's a difference between doing it one time and doing it several times. And so the first thing I think I would tell any SEC fan base is that to assume being a national title contender year after year, I think is not something even the best programs can assume anymore. A team like Florida, who is operating about as good as any program in the country right now, them and Vanderbilt perhaps. In 2019, Florida was a bubble team. They got in at the last weekend because they swept Mizzou. Vanderbilt got eliminated in regionals, home regionals in the recent past. So there's nobody who can just waltz into being a national title contender every single year. But I think South Carolina is on that path. I've been a Mark Kingston defender for a while because all he's really done is win. He won at Illinois State and he won at South Florida. And the other thing that I would tell you is look at what happened in some of those programs, once he left. And that I don't mean that disrespectfully to those programs, but Illinois State, it took them 4 or 5 years to kind of get back into a postseason position. South Florida has struggled the last couple of years. And sometimes that's just circumstantial. It doesn't necessarily say anything about those coaches, but, he's won in places he's been. And then when he's moved on, it's been hard for those programs to continue that level of excellence. And so I think that speaks well of him and his coaching staff and being able to win long term.
You mentioned earlier that they'll announce the regional sites on May 10th.
May 10th.
And then there's basically 3 weeks after that before, we'll have conference tournaments and all that afterwards. And you'll know that's just one of those COVID things that we're just going to have to get used to, because you could have a team that could get absurdly hot in the tournament and win the tournament. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, we may not give the ACC champion a host because we gave it to someone else.
Yeah. And they'll have to travel as a 1 seed to some other regional. The example I've thought of is, you've got that a lot of times you see it in the ACC. The ACC tournament and their format is a little bit wonky where teams can sometimes make deep runs. And we've seen Florida State has done this in the past where they make a run deep into the ACC tournament and they go from being a team that was, maybe just on the right side of the bubble to going all the way to hosting with a late run during the season. That team just is not going to exist this year. Now you can play your way into being a 1 seed, but you're never going to play your way into being a host. And the other weird thing about that is the super regional sites are only going to be among those 16 hosts. So if South Carolina hosts in Columbia and let's say East Carolina hosts in Greenville, but both those host teams lose, the super regional between the 2 seeds, let's say North Carolina wins the regional in Columbia, and let's say, Clemson wins the regional in Greenville.
Right.
Those 2 teams are going to have to play. North Carolina and Clemson are going to have to play in either Columbia or Greenville. They can't rebid and go to Chapel Hill, for example.
And that's just for this season, but I honestly did not know that. I should have kept up with that. But yeah, that's a big deal because if you get eliminated, that's your city's still hosting.
Yeah.
That's wow. What a mess that is. Someone sent me this message earlier about the NCAA, and they had the Governor McMaster mention something a couple weeks ago about stuff with the transgendered athletes and things like that. That's not going to affect the regional host for this year, right?
I would be speaking out of turn to give you a definitive answer
right
there. But my just snap thing would be that given that that's kind of a new thing right now, I would assume that is the case. But like I said, I would be speaking out of turn if I gave you a definitive answer.
I'm wondering how that's going to work out. And I don't like to talk politics on the show. We never do that. This is about sports, which is your getaway. I get it. But it's something that can affect South Carolina's ability to host. And I wonder if they're going to impose that on baseball and, hey, you can't have NCAA functions here because of that. And I wonder if that's going to happen. We'll have to see how that shakes out. Just one of those other things we have to keep an eye on. All right. So for tonight, what do you, quick thoughts on what you think is going to the flow for tonight's game and how it's going to change, how it may have changed with the fact they're going to have to play a doubleheader tomorrow.
So I don't think for tonight's game, I don't think it changes a ton in terms of the way the teams play it, because I know coaches well enough to know that they're just focused on let's win this one game. Let's worry about tomorrow. I don't know if I would do that as a coach, but they know more than me about baseball. They've forgotten more than I'll ever know. So that's the way they play it. And so that's the way they do it. So I don't think it affects much in terms of this one game. I think a key for South Carolina is you've got to get Arkansas in a position where they're scrambling on the mound. I think you can do that. They do like to mix and match, but it's hard to mix and match your way out of a game when your starting pitcher only gives you one inning. They've done that this year and won games, but it makes it a heck of a lot harder. And that's where tomorrow comes into play. Because to your point, you said earlier in the show, if they burn 6 or 7 pitchers tonight, that makes tomorrow really tough, especially if 3 or 4 of those throw 30 plus pitches, right?
Yeah.
So if they throw 15 pitches, you can bring them back probably, but you're not going to throw tomorrow a lot of guys who threw 25, 30, 35 pitches. So I think that's key for South Carolina. And that's, I think in general, a key for them. Is the thing about it is I like the South Carolina lineup. I think it's got some depth to it, but it has tailed off a little bit in terms of just the physicality of it. I think that's typified in a guy like Wes Clark, who is probably the best hitter in college baseball for the first few weeks of the season, carried over from last year. And he still had some nice things, but he hasn't hit a home run since early April, I think. And so, I think that's a big thing for South Carolina generally, not just for him specifically, but I think this is a lineup that you can do some things against Arkansas, and I think it'll need to win the series.
Joe Healy from Baseball America joins us. He was supposed to join us here tomorrow, but he's going to be up in the booth, up in the press box for that matchup. Of course, he'll give us a call tomorrow. We did secure that with him. All right, so don't forget, Lawton Swan of Clemson Sports Talk is next. He is the czar of Clemson Sports.
Stop looking at me, Swan.
Yes, be sure to follow his show from 4 to 6 right here on Fox Sports Radio 1400. More of the rundown tomorrow. Enjoy the game tonight.